Welcome to Leadershipedelics Season 2 Part 2. I'm Sebastian Fouillade. Join me every week to explore the intersection between deep spiritual experiences and leadership. Leadership in the sense of how do you manifest a better future for yourself, for your family, for your community, and for others. So join me every week as I interview guests who've had those hardships, those journeys, those heroes' journeys, and they share the insights that they've gained along the way. Insights meant to inspire us, meant to awaken us, meant to help us build a better future. I've got a very special announcement. We're organizing a Sacred Creativity Retreat in October of this year in the Sacred Valley of Peru. Now, what's a Sacred Creativity Retreat? Well, it's all about reconnecting you with your untainted, authentic, creative selves. You know, finding that creativity from a center of alignment, finding that creativity from a center that is not tainted by the judgments of others, by the programming we've had in society. So if you're interested, check out the website retreat.fouillade.com. That's retreat.fooyad.com for more information. And I hope the stars align and I can see some of you there. In this episode of Leadershipedelics, meet Hanifa Nayo Washington. Hanifa is a social entrepreneur, cultural producer, and healing justice practitioner. She's a facilitator, reiki master, singer, songwriter, and a creator who works at the intersection of mindfulness, placemaking, and social justice. She's the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Fireside Project. She's involved with the American Psychedelic Practitioners Association, East Forest Journey Space, and the Global Wellness Institute Psychedelics and Healing Initiative. She's the co-founder of One Village Healing, a BIPOC-centered healing, resilience, and psychedelic wellness space, and is a lead facilitator of the New Haven Community Leadership Program. We cover a wide range of topics, including Hanifa's medicine songs, her creative process, and how these songs have helped her and others in their journeys. We talk about the importance of listening in our lives and leadership in helping one another and to drive change in the world. We cover the Fireside Project's mission, training approach, and upcoming equity initiative. Hanifa closes our discussion with a beautiful song from her Mantras for the Revolution album. This was a beautiful discussion, wonderful, very magical. I hope you enjoy it and see you on the other side. Welcome to Leadershipedelics, Hanifa Nayo Washington. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to this time together.
Thank you. First, how's your day going? Like, I know you just moved recently, and
yes,
how are things?
Yes. It's a beautiful day here in Portland, Oregon. I did a cross-country move from New Haven, Connecticut about 10 days ago, and the sun is shining and there's puffy clouds in the sky, so it's a good one.
Oh, well, I'm a little bit north of you, and we've had sun and rain. In fact, just right before I got on the call with you, it was pouring rain, and I'm right under the roof, so I was like, please stop raining. Though it would be beautiful, but sometimes it makes it challenging. So yeah, we're kind of blessed right now. This is a beautiful time in the spring in the Northwest. It's like the plants are getting water, the birds are coming out and singing. This is my favorite time of year.
There are so many birds.
Oh yeah. Good. Like what led you to move?
Yeah, I've been wanting to move for a handful of years, and I didn't know where exactly I was going to move, but I did want to move west. I knew that much. Was kind of contemplating before the pandemic. And then, during the pandemic, I was a part of some magic that happened in the creation of Fireside Project. And my co-founder lives in San Francisco. So the pull west was even stronger because working across time zones is a little nuts sometimes. But I visited Portland last fall. And I really just there was this immediate wow, I just loved the land. It was sweet. I loved the gentleness of this space, and some pretty amazing people live here as well. And so to know that I have friends here and there's amazing things in the psychedelic space happening in Portland, it just felt like a really obvious yes.
Oh, beautiful. There's so much good things happening in the Portland and Oregon area, and I used to live there, and And there's
Wow.
so much work to be done as well in that area.
Oh,
And
nice.
I could see also how your energy just joining the forces there and the teams there could really help and make a difference. So I'm excited
Mm.
to see where that leads. And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring something up new that I haven't done in too many other interviews yet. Actually, today is the day I'm starting this. But it's actually a concept of pulling cards, oracle cards. And
Beautiful.
this deck is called the Earth Magic deck. So for people watching, they can see the Earth Magic deck, and it's got beautiful pictures. And this is something you're probably familiar with. That you told me you actually had the same deck.
I do. Yeah, I love Oracle decks. It's so wonderful. And in all of my moving, I haven't been able to find that particular deck yet. So I guess it got sent to
Oh
you.
wow, there you go. It got sent my way. And this one is very special because I bought this one for my kids to introduce them to oracle cards. And it's something like when I help with ceremonies, we'll do before the ceremony, and
Hmm.
it's really amazing to see what comes out sometimes, and the reflections that come out, and how that gets tied to the intent.
Yeah.
So, with your permission, I will ask the oracles to bless us with a message for you and for your new
Oh, yeah.
adventure. Yeah, so you're good with that?
You have my consent. So
Oh, thank
please.
you. Thank you. So, please, oracles, deliver us a message for Hanifa Nayo Washington, who came to join us closer on the West Coast, to bless us with our gifts. And yes, and so I'll mix the cards now. So for people who are listening, the cards are getting mixed, and I'm going to go the faster way, but with lots of intents, thinking about Hanifa and her journey, and channeling that. And then I'll do the simpler way, where I simply drop the deck and find out
Okay.
where there's a break in the deck,
Hmm.
which is a friend of mine did that. He's a lot more efficient because my wife and I will just keep mixing the cards, and it works
Mm.
just as well. So the card here that we got today
Ah,
is
clouds.
clouds and shape shifting.
That's wonderful.
Um, and yes,
Literally, there's like puffy clouds outside my window, so it's just amazing.
it's a beautiful card. It shows some clouds with beautiful light energy behind them, and you can see the silver lining. And I'm not necessarily going to read the text that comes with it, but like just seeing this, like how does that make you feel about where you're at in your journey right now?
Yeah, I feel again this incredible just synchronicity as like literally I've just been admiring these big puffy clouds today outside my window, and this idea of it just feels like very freeing and just sort of being emergent and flowing.
Yeah.
And I feel like after these past 2 years of kind of being like really sedimentary, I think indoors and trying to survive this pandemic, there's something that I needed in terms of like stimulation and movement to sort of balance my sort of overall energy out because I feel like I've just been very still. So I feel like I am moving into more of a shifting and emergent and airy type of space,
Oh,
particularly moving west in this way, and then being a part of also just like this healing space right now, which also feels very emergent and moving and
yeah.
things coming together and coming apart and sort of the connectivity that's represented in all of that too.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I'm not gonna pull a card for myself unless you feel a
Okay.
need for it. But
Maybe
like,
at the end. Yeah.
sorry.
maybe at the end.
Yeah, maybe at the end. I really want to make this about you and your journey, and that was a message for you. So I really appreciate you letting me do that. To prepare for the show, I was actually listening to your album that you put out a few years back, 2017, I think. And there's also a bit of synchronicity there, because one of the things I'm trying to do on the show is bring people use music to heal themselves and to heal others. And so as I started listening to the album, like, first you have a beautiful gift, a beautiful voice, and you bring in guitar at the same time.
Thank you.
It's hard not to get caught in that healing power of that music. And I'm curious, what is your process to create that music, and how has that helped you and maybe helped others?
I love this question. So that album is called Mantras for the Revolution. And for me, I am a very spirited person. I listen to spirit, I meditate, and I pray, and I ask questions, and I listen. I listen for the discernment. I listen for the answers and direction. And Mantras for the Revolution actually is a straight up integration. So I had a really powerful ayahuasca ceremony, and these songs kind of came after this one particular ceremony, kind of one after the other over the course of a few months, maybe almost a half a year. And I'm a singer-songwriter amongst many things. And so normally my process is, because I'm journaling and writing stuff all the time, sort of I might get inspired by, I see something or I hear something and it might inspire a response, and I'll write it down, and I'll write all these little lines down in journals. And then I will sometimes pick up my guitar and just start noodling around. And then maybe one of those little noodles kind of matches the tone of one of these little things I've written. And then I'll just continue to write or continue to play. So I kind of riff like that. I rarely sit down and say, I'm going to write a song about love. Like, that's just not how it works for me. So I have just this particular way that I go. These songs came through, they came through me. They were sent, and they always came when I was like walking. Where I lived in New Haven, there's this big rock called West Rock Park, beautiful big trap rock, and there's a river that runs by underneath on the west side of the rock. And there's like a forest and a little clearings and paths. And so I would walk there frequently. And the first song that came through was actually the river song was the first one that kind of came through. And I had taken a walk, and I was sitting by the river, and kind of reflecting on this ayahuasca journey that I had, and remembering the teachings and some of the pieces, the knowledge, wisdom that came through. And the song just came to me, the kind of the main part of it. And so that I just was like kind of humming it and singing it for the rest of my walk. And then I came home and I wrote it down. And then this would happen. I was always outside. As a part of my walk, there was another song called Sweet Revolution that maybe I'll sing today. I was walking through the trail, and I came to this like clearing part on the trail, nice, beautiful field with a path that runs through the middle. And as soon as I came out of the shade of the trees and the sun hit my face, this song came through. It just I couldn't even control it. It just burst through me. And so and I was singing that out loud back to the sun. And then I went home and wrote it down. And so this happened, about 7 times. And so I wrote all these little songs down, these lines, and reordered them in a way that felt aligned with the chakras. So the these sort of core, basic core energy centers in the body. And There's one for each core, so there's 7 songs. And so I just began to sing them as part of my morning prayer and meditation. And they were really powerful and really did capture the learnings that came through from this particular ayahuasca journey for me. And I was just felt so, it was, I'd never done anything like nothing like that had ever come through me. And I was just like, wowed. And then the little tap, 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 little spirit was like, you need to record these. These aren't just for you.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, no one's going to want to listen to these songs. Like these are mine. And it was like, no, these are not yours. These are for everybody. So you need to record them.
Oh.
I didn't listen. I was hard-headed. I didn't listen for a year. But then I finally recorded them and did a release and put them out into the world. So they're, on Spotify and all of the music channels, like Apple Music and Google and on my website. I wanted to make them accessible. And it's amazing, Sebastian, like I began to do these live experiences with the songs. So I will gather people. I think at most one time I had like maybe 150 people at one of the sessions. And I lead the songs. So we go through each song, starting with the root chakra song, then up to the crown. And so I'm teaching the songs, we're singing together. We're also doing like breath work and somatic work. Yeah. We do some interpersonal dynamic work as well. So there's some connectivity that happens amongst the group that's there. And it's amazing. It is like a kirtan, like a soulful kirtan type vibe. It's amazing. And it's just such a high energy, like after that, and really, really powerful. People move a lot of stuff and bring in a lot of goodness. Yeah. And so like it's called Mantras for the Revolution. So, these are songs for the revolution, and the revolution is now. And I'm talking about the revolution of anchoring more love here on Earth, and making that the most predominant force. And so, I invite people to sing these songs whenever they need them, before meals, when they're going into a difficult conversation, as celebration, in ceremony, like use these songs, sing these songs. These are our songs, and they carry power and wisdom. So yeah, I just loved that project, and it just keeps giving. And I get emails and little responses every now and then, little tags, people being like, me and my daughter sing this song, before we go to, to visit our, a loved one that's passed. Someone said they shared one of their songs at their wedding. Like, it's just, it's just amazing to see how they're connecting with folks out in the world.
That magic is fascinating. There's so much healing that happens both for the creator, the receivers. There's also an asynchronous, timeless connection to the wisdom that happens, which is really fantastic. I mean, that river song felt instantly timeless to me when I listened to it. Felt instantly timeless and universal. I listened to it like just an hour ago. I didn't know this album existed before. I was like, oh wow, she did this too. And I took out my harmonica and I played with it. And I was like, oh, yes, this will be great at the end of a ceremony. And I think like sometimes when you're in a ceremony, it's almost transcending time and space when you're even listening to the songs, even if the author is not there, you're connecting back to that source. You're connecting back to the source that's behind the conduit that you occupied when you created that. And I find this fascinating, and the creative process that you were going through, I was like, it was just coming. I mean, that happens. That's real. Like, I've heard it from, the Shipibo maestros. They will talk about that, how they get their Icaros during their apprenticeship. And, and how much healing for you was that to use those songs as you were doing your meditation every day with them?
Yeah, it was really quite something. And so there was probably like a year that I was really working with those songs every day. And then it sort of kind of started to taper off, and it might be once a week that I sit down and I will go through all 7, like as a practice. And it was fun. There was levity there was playfulness, and there was also this great awareness for me that really inspired about 3 years of veganism. So there's a song called For the Belly, Fire Belly. It's called Fire Belly. And so it goes like, fire belly dance. And there's this part that's like says, eat up the light and dance. Eat up the light and dance. And so I think about what is the closest to eating the sun that I could get to, and it's fruits and vegetables, like whole foods. And so it's the least traction on the body. It causes the least inflammation when you're just trying to eat straight light. And so we can get that in all of our greens and our fruits. And so there was a great time of healing for me when I was practicing veganism in this way. I don't think it's something that I could personally do forever, but it was a great cleanse and a great remembering of being in right relation with what we're ingesting into the body.
Anything that comes into the body, especially ingesting, it's good to be reminded of that. Another thing I noticed beforehand when I was digging around is like you really live what your name means, and I'll let you explain what I mean by that. But you talked about happiness, and I think your name has a little bit to do with that.
Yes. So Hanifa Nayo is a really special gift, and my parents were part of the Black pro-liberation movement in the late 70s, like kind of at the tail end of the Black Panther Party at that time. And they really were in a space of, reclaiming roots. And they were a part of a group where they shed their Christian, names and had renaming ceremonies. And they also wanted their children to have names that were from Africa and also had meaning. And so my father had converted to Islam also, and so he wanted me to have an Arabic name. My mom wanted me to have an African name, and so they did some digging around, some research, and they found Hanifa is actually shared between both of those cultures. And so Hanifs are like spiritual, like priest type folks. That's what Hanifs mean in Arabic. It means true believer, and in the Arabic language, West African, it's like first daughter, the bringer of happiness. So the first daughter is the bringer of happiness, and Nayo means with whom I go. So Hanifa Nayo means the bringer of happiness or true believer with whom I go. And, when I was a kid, I loathed the difficulty that people had saying my name, remembering my name. And I just wanted a normal name. And my mom told me, actually, she was like, whenever you want to shed this sort of legal last name, Washington, which we all understand that root and connection. She's like, you have two powerful names, so you can shed Washington when you wish. And I actually think I'm going to do that this year or the end of next year as a ceremony.
Shape-shifting.
That colonizing name. Yeah. And so, the bringer of happiness with whom I go. And I really began to take pride in my name and connect with it like later in life, like in my late 20s, early 30s. I'm 44, just for reference. And I think it is a lot to live up to, but parents know, when they name a child, it's like setting them on a path. And I try to bring joy and happiness and the power of belief in everything I do and wherever I go.
Oh, It's beautiful. I mean, I can feel that. And, I was listening to you in other interviews, and we talked together, and I listened to your album, and I can feel that happiness that you bring along. I can feel that you taking us along in your music. When I was listening to the album, I was like, I'm there. Like, Portland is so lucky to have you. It's only 3 hours away. I'll come down.
Yeah, come through.
So it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, a lot of times parents do put a lot of thought into the names.
Yeah.
And living up to that, sometimes it's really, really high bar. So
yeah, when I was like a 13-year-old, it definitely was not the bringer of happiness. my mom would attest to that.
Yeah. So you're a very spiritual person now. Have you always been as spiritual as you are now, or was there kind of a tipping point earlier in your life where you're like,
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes I struggle with words and the words that we have to describe ways of being. And spiritual is one of them. Like, I describe myself as spiritual, but it is not, it doesn't, it doesn't encapsulate what it is for me.
I feel like you're much more than that. Like, it's some of it, like what you are is really human. Like, and like when I see everything you're doing, it's the spectrum of humanity and love and happiness. And there's a lot of things there. So, I don't want to shrink it down to spiritual.
Sure. I think that I feel a deep reverence, and when I say awesome, like I really mean awesome, like an awesomeness about just life and consciousness and being. And so I've always been one to just be like amazed and sometimes overwhelmed, right, by the beauty of life and that this is happening right now. Like, we're in theory, flying through time and space on a little rock, circling a controlled, fire explosion.
Well, when you put it like that.
So my mind goes there quite often. And as a kid, I was kind of overwhelmed by it, honestly. I would start thinking about all of these things and I would just like freeze. And so, but I have a deep reverence and awe for it. And I just want to be in a way and in a place where to just like to be able to appreciate it, to appreciate life. And so I think that I've always had that kind of feeling. I've always been very empathic is also one of those words. It's like I feel people, I feel vibes, like I sense people's emotions, and for better or worse, and have done a lot of work around creating a container for myself to not get overwhelmed. And so I think that I am really alive. When I think about spirit and spiritual, it's like being alive, being of the spirit. And so I grew up, in a very religious family. My grandmother is still the mother of the Baptist church that I was baptized in. She's going to be like 91 this year. So church to me was synonymous with also singing. So I was 5 years old when I joined the church choir. I was the youngest one, and I've been singing since I was forever, singing in choir, singing at home, singing with my mom while we're cooking dinner, like singing with friends. Like, singing is for me such a practice and such a vehicle for presence and spirit. And so I think I'm rambling with this answer, but yes, I think I've always been very sensitive to spirit and to the magic of life.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful, and the singing is. I'm glad it stayed with you all those years, and because I'll talk to a lot of people where they have something when they're younger, and then it disappears, and then they have to find it back later in life. And so the fact that you were able to keep that companion with you on that journey is is beautiful. So as you were growing up in that journey with your spirit, your humanness, like when did you cross paths with plant or fungi medicine? At which point did that happen?
Yeah. So I
That
think
you can disclose.
I'm like, well, it's like I've done enough interviews. It's like my mom knows already now. So
oh, there you go.
But I really came across psychedelics in my college years,
Yeah.
and before that, knew nothing. I knew nothing of nothing, like not even like alcohol, smoking. Like I knew it was not in my awareness of things that happen in the world. And so one of my first experiences was with mushrooms. And it was so fun. It was so fun. I had so much fun. I felt just like really tingly, and we were outside the whole time. So we were running in the grass with our shoes off and just screaming and twirling and giggling. And it was so fun. And I just hadn't experienced that type of like freedom, like in my body, where I just was like kind of just opened, and I was like, wow. And so that was like a bit of a doorway. And then experienced worked with LSD, which was really different.
Yeah.
And
how different?
LSD for me was like very like technical is a word, but it was like I could just think. It's like I just would begin to understand and perceive things in a real like logical way, and like very mathematical, and my perception would just get like very sharp. It's very sharp, whereas I felt mushrooms were more like swirly and twirly, and LSD really it got me in my body, but in a different way. It was like I always wanted to climb trees when I was on LSD for whatever reason, and just like, and I did. And I would
I was going to ask you.
And I would sit up in the branches and just think, and just like be. It just was so. It was totally expansive.
I can relate.
Very expansive experience. Yeah.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I can relate to that. First time I had LSD, I stared at a blade of grass as the sun set on that blade of grass. And that's all I did. And it was wonderful. It's also very long. And there's the technical aspect of it you called out is really hard to put into words, but it goes in a lot of different ways too. Like when I was listening to music with LSD, I felt like the music was like etching the walls of a cave in very sharp ways compared to more subtle ways with other medicine. And I found that interesting. And like for somebody like you who's also been with your voice and using your voice, how did that, like, did you use that in the context of mushroom experiences or LSD experiences as you were experiencing those altered states? Like, were you revisiting your voice?
Yeah. So, sometimes they have that saying that the youth is wasted on the young. So I feel like my early experiences with psychedelics, I didn't know what I was doing. There was no integration. There was no guide. There was just like a lot of young people just sort of ingesting and hanging out. So I was just in the state of like, I just want to have fun. But being musical, I definitely remember some journeys during my younger years, like on the calm down, sitting in circle and playing music together with folks and making up really silly songs. I think when I came into what I call like the reverence years, like when I came in relationship with psychedelics in a true form of respect and of healing, like seeking healing, and being and having a ceremonial community, singing was central. My first ayahuasca ceremony was the Santo Daime ceremony. So in those ceremonies, you're moving a lot, back and forth, and you're singing and being sung to. And so I could just, I could just get lost in that for hours now, and hours and hours, and I did indeed. So
how did
singing,
that feel?
But also,
how did that feel?
It's amazing. Yeah. It felt that the Santo Daime ceremonies always to me feel like church, because it is. Yeah. But it brought me somatically back to the comfort of being a kid in church and being younger in church, and that feeling when all of the voices are coming together and being one. Like it's out of you, but it's coming from you, but it's joining with other people, and it just feels awesome. It feels like I connect with like the vibration of everything when I let it out. But then when I'm hearing and then feeling that from everyone else, it just feels like this embrace, this universal embrace, and just allows me to relax, but also like release and feel supported and held. I am someone who's can be pretty high strung sometimes, and suffer from just like, a little, probably PTSD, but, not diagnosed. And so the process of healing and toning and humming it just allows me to relax in ways that nothing else does. And when I combine that with like being with psychedelics, it is a true journey, and a true it is truly sacred.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm letting that sinking. It was like that space. And when you're talking about humming, are you also talking about creating music yourself in that space, or humming along with everybody else, or like at some point did you shift from participating in the Santo Daime to actually working with the medicine and the music during the ceremony? I mean, you touched on that earlier. I'm curious, that first time where you took the lead during a ceremony, how did that feel?
Yeah, it was really, really special to be more of like a space holder and setting the container and holding the container. It's something really, again, sacred, and like I just feel so honored, like for like that folks trust that they're going to be safe, because that's so important to me, is creating safe containers where people can really also like relax and let loose and let whatever wants to emerge, and knowing that all of this is welcome. And so there's the reverence is a word. A reverence is a word that comes up a lot for me, and it also feels like I can see it. It's like I can see when the tones like hit the energy field of the other, and they open, and like allow it, and then I can also feel that when that happens, and I don't know how else to
it's beautiful the way you said it. I can relate to this.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'd love to be more conversations around, around the power of creating that space, but also producing that experience, that music that's not necessarily a playlist, but you can actually adjust it and help people.
I was talking with someone earlier this week, and this notion of like co-regulation came up that I thought was so brilliant. And so when I think about co-creating spaces, setting containers, and even like in the process of like deep listening and holding space and reflective listening and integrating this process, like we people, human beings, we're energy beings, and so we are co-regulating. Like when you're coming into space with someone, we're doing it right now. It's like we begin to match each other. And then you can choose to not match that person if that's is what needs to happen to feel safe. This is what happens when people have power over people. So we can come into coherence with each other, and there's a real a special, I feel like, pathway opens up when we do that intentionally and consciously together.
Yeah.
And I think that is like some of the magic behind creating safe places and creating containers for healing, particularly with psychedelics.
That's beautiful. It's funny because as I'm doing those podcasts, I'm approaching him more and more like a ceremony in and of itself, because you are creating a space, you are opening a ceremony, you are closing it at the end, and listening, which I want to touch on, is a huge part of it. And that active listening and knowing where that flow is going to go and being there with the person, like that's a skill. That's a skill. And talking about that skill, I know like everything I'm reading and listening comes on again and again and again for you. And you're like, you have beautiful music, but I'd love you to kind of reflect more on the importance of listening and in your life and your work. And Fireside Project is, we could lead into that.
Sure. So many years ago, I started to create a framework and an experience that I called Circle Up. And it used sort of like somatic exercises, and this was done in group. So somatic exercises, story sharing, reflective listening, meditation and silence. And it was all to have a conversation about the power of listening, and that listening is at the center, I feel, at the heart of of change, of connection. When we think about social justice movements and liberation, listening and how we listen or not is the centrality of power and how we use our power. And so when we are listened to, it is one of the most absolute gifts and declarations of respect that we can give one another. When we choose to not listen, that's where the beginning of all atrocity, crime, hate, imbalance, injustice, I feel, comes from. It is the intention to not listen, to not acknowledge, to not give reverence and respect to someone's beingness and their life.
Yeah.
And so we do not have institutions or practices in the United States anyway that teach us how to listen.
That's right. We teach debate. We don't teach listen. And I had a big argument with my kids on that. I was like, are you willing to change your mind when you go into a debate class? It's like, no, Dad, I've got my facts and it's about winning the debate. I'm like, but what's the point there? Like, you should go with an open mind and ready to change your mind. Like, we don't have debates in France, but I don't know if we have listening classes either. You're touching on something really important. I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, it feels like just a short falling of like humanity, that we learn all these other technical things, but when it comes to like how to relate to each other and how to really be in deep respect, we, I guess, maybe lean on our religious and spiritual practices for that, but it's not something like in institutions that's taught and practiced. And it's something that does need to be practiced. It's a muscle that we all have, but it has to be identified and then practiced. And so I think that, to me, listening is a critical thing, and is underutilized and under resourced. And so I think that listening, like truly listening, one might say heart listening or reflective listening, compassionate listening, for me has made me a better leader. It has made me also listen to myself. It has made me aware of, like, practicing these sort of listening activities has helped me listen to my body, my needs, my voices, my inner voices, my thoughts. Listening to, right, spirit and the knocking that happens, the inner little tap. Hey, you should, we're waiting for you to do this. This is your assignment. So I think that there's a lot of power in it. And in many of my facilitations and trainings that I lead, listening is really some of the first and central things that I uphold and help people practice. And you talked about Fireside Project, and so Fireside Project, is a emerging nonprofit that has a mission to reduce the risks and also amplify the potential of psychedelic experiences for everybody. And that's done through culturally attuned care, that's done through education, and also producing and sharing research, and all of it through and with the lens of liberation and equity for all in mind. And so one of the first things that we did as a part of this project was create the Psychedelic Peer Support Line, which is available to anybody nationwide. We are open 12 hours a day, 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, with a goal of becoming 24/7 within the first 2 years. And you can call or text 62-FIRESIDE. And so Fireside was chosen as the name because it was a feeling we wanted people to have, for eons. All people, all of us, all of our ancestors, we've been gathering around fires, right? In ceremony, to honor the passing, for ritual, to eat, to sleep, to feel protected. And so this, like, circling around the fire is this feeling we want people to have when they call the line or think about the line, that you're welcome, you can sit down, you'll be safe, you'll be nourished. And we will hold that sacred space with you. And so it's a line you can call or text if you are in the midst of a psychedelic experience. So if you're, on a trip, on a journey, and also anytime after your experience. And so that could be the following day or like 20 years later. It's for anybody who's ever tripped. We feel like you should utilize this line because you are probably still integrating from your psychedelic experience. And so we believe that no one should ever be alone. During these times. So if you want supported, you want someone to hold the space, to know that someone's there, that you're tethered, that some of the things you're experiencing are normal. You want someone to hold the space and reflect with you as you try to make sense of what your experience was and what you want to glean and learn from that. You can call 62-FIRESIDE. And a volunteer, peer support, someone who's had their own transformative experiences, will be there, for you and with you, and during that time. And so our volunteers, we've trained now about 85 volunteers, and we do a 4-day training. And it is greatly around practicing listening skills. And so that means practicing getting out of your way. So not being there with your questions and your curiosities and your sort of blinders and your ego. So we're really helping people to practice, like, just purely reflecting what you might hear someone say, reflecting the not only just the words, but like some of the intention behind what someone is saying. Being there, we really are so honored to be able to stand on the shoulders and the wisdom of what the Zendo Project has brought into the space already for the past decade, and definitely believe and attest to the basics of like how to hold space for folks. So to not be a guide, right? To be with people. We're not trying to fix others. We are not coming with our own agenda. And also allowing the person who's calling it calling in or texting in to dictate what's going to happen. And so our training teaches folks about the power of silence. It teaches people about how to ask reflective questions, how to reflectively listen and to share back to people, to mirror, helping people to know that things that they're experiencing are normal, as well as, we provide some information, educational information. If people need resources, we point them to resources. And we really are a net that catches all folks. So folks who are experiencing psychedelics within clinical settings, non-clinical settings for the first time, veterans, and we think that the gift of being listened to is golden, and that's what you will experience if and when you call the support line.
Thank you. This is so important. I recommend this to anybody who tells me they're planning on having a psychedelic journey. It's like, please make sure you have this app on your phone, and you never know what can happen. Like, a lot of times, like, every experience is different. I've got people who tell me I have no trauma, and I'm going to go do this ceremony, and I'm like, okay. Well, just make sure you have the Fireside app loaded, and I did donate. Like, full disclaimer, I did donate to your campaign. I don't know if the campaign is still going on or not. Is that still going on? Raising money for Fireside?
Yes, absolutely. It will always be going on.
Okay, great. And I'll put all that information in there. Another thing that I hadn't realized it, actually, I just thought about it briefly before the meeting, which was the name that you touched on, the Fireside name, and which includes multiple things in that. It includes the listening, the storytelling, the community, the looking into the fire and seeing things in that fire. And I really appreciated you taking us there, because it's something that I think during psychedelic journeys we'll get glimpses on. But I do feel we probably all miss that, whether it's the community, the gathering around the fire, the listening, the active listening. There's like a doctor, that's all he does. I remember on the podcast, I forgot his name, but it's like the listener doctor. And he's like, I learned all that stuff in psychology, but then at the end, it's all about listening. And I go to prisons and I listen to people, and, and the work he was doing. And I could see, for you in your journey and the Fireside Project and a lot of things that you're doing, that listening and bringing that to the world, and having discussions. Also, the art of having a discussion implies you need to listen and you don't come with an agenda.
Yes.
And so that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. For that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just wanted to share on that. We understand, like, all the Fireside Project is like an equity initiative, right? So it's about making sure that there's care and support for all people. This is a free service. It is confidential, and will always be so. And something we also know is true is that in the psychedelic space, and also just in society in general, there are power dynamics. There are systems of oppression at play. A lot of people have traumas from those very systems. I know for myself personally, some of those things came up in some of my early ayahuasca experiences, where I was able to really acknowledge the impact of some systems of oppression, like how racial trauma, how being a woman, a Black woman in this society, like where some of the pain of being othered was living within my body, and how it impacted like how I was showing up and how I could connect or would connect with others. And so we are making space at Fireside Project to really acknowledge some of these discrepancies and power dynamics. And so we want to make sure that the psychedelic space continues to grow, and that there are people from all types of lived experiences who are the researchers, who are those being researched, who are the folks who are the clinicians, and the folks opening up the service centers, and those growing, the mushrooms or whatever. And so we are launching this equity initiative that would bring on a cohort of affinity volunteers or affinity peers. And those peers, once they work a year on the line, will have access to some support afterwards. But what they're doing on the line for their year of service is being available to any callers who come from that affinity group. So we're going to be focusing on military veterans, transgender folks, and folks from the BIPOC community. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, Latina, or Latinx, Asian, Southeast Asian folks. So when you call the line, starting June 23rd is when this service launches. Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 3 to 7 Pacific time. If you desire such, you'll be able to request an affinity peer to integrate with. Because sometimes you need that choice, particularly groups who have been marginalized. There might be a very particular thing that you want to integrate about that. It would not be great to speak to just anybody, but you want to have someone who could understands your lived experience in a different way, and where there could be greater empathy and cultural understanding. So we're going to launch this pilot and see how it goes, see if there's interest in it, and then grow the affinity groups over time. So it won't just be limited to those that I just mentioned now. And then those folks who volunteer with us who come from affinity groups will have access to grants, to scholarships, so that they can advance themselves within the psychedelic space. So over time, we'll see generations of practitioners and researchers and growers and business leaders who are coming from these communities, who ideally, because we know representation matters, will then have people who come from those communities seeking, the psychedelic wellness and healing as well, and really changing the landscape of the psychedelic space in this way.
You touched a little bit on racial trauma, that, and I was recently educated on this when I watched the Wisdom of Trauma movie. And I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about how that plays out across generations, because that's something that, until I watched this and listened to somebody explain it, I didn't really understand how deep it went, and how we're still talking about things that happened, hundreds of years ago, and why that was, and why that trauma is still there. And it's important to have people, to your point, that understand that.
Yeah. It's I think that there is, traumas that get passed down, through the lineages, through, your genes, through your maternal genes, in a really particular way, as well as wisdom, gifts, and knowledge, so just to be clear. And I think that there are traits and rememberings that are stored in the DNA that guide people towards certain behaviors, and like they might have a propensity to do, to interact in certain ways, to speak in certain ways, to avoid in certain ways. And I can't say this is how it happens for everyone, because it's not necessarily one universal formula. So I think that trauma and racialized trauma really, I'm speaking from my own lived experience, really lives a lot in the body itself. And it can show up as stress, that then can impact many things. And when you read all of the studies, particularly in the United States, the folks who are impacted most by diseases that come from stress are people of color, and particularly Black people, and particularly Black women. When we talk about hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, the numbers are like twice as much in Black women than they are in any other populations, and why? That's because of racial trauma, as well as lived compacted trauma. That's always happening.
Yeah.
So you're going to receive it through your genes, and then you're also responding in real time from the racial trauma that's happening and the racial stressors. So it is very much of an embodied thing, as well as, behavior choices, and behavior choices based on feelings of safety and belonging.
Yeah. And some of what psychedelics can help with is be able to see the trauma, work with it.
Yes.
And so having an affinity group that is able to understand you as you might be going through that is really important. And so, I'm connecting the dots here. And for people who are listening who might be like, oh, why is that really needed? I was like, no, it is really needed, because, like there's big differences in who we are. And there's people that haven't walked in other people's shoes. And,
and so there's this reality of like, can someone call the line and receive excellent care and be listened to by someone who doesn't predominantly share a part of their identity? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we talk about creating culturally attuned care, there must be options for choice. Yeah. Sharing the power in that. So giving the user the choice of like, what experience do they want to have? So that creates more equity and more liberation, for all people. And, a military veteran, for example, if they want to call the line and process a psychedelic experience, they'll have the choice to speak to someone who's also a military veteran. Have they had the same veteran experience? No. Right. But will there be a better understanding and potential for empathy and an ability to listen in a deeper way? Yeah. Yes, and that's also true across gender, and it's also true across race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think just knowing that you're being listened to, like, I don't know, if me growing up in France, for example, if I called the line and I was like, oh, that person that's listening to me, they grew up in a similar culture, they experienced some of the similar challenges, this and that. And even if they don't say anything, just the fact that I know that is actually helping me know that I'm not alone, which I think is another important thing. Is maybe it's me going extreme and dramatic here, but like over the years, it feels like people are more and more alone. With all the tools we have to connect ourselves, we feel more and more alone. We feel more and more alone because those tools connect us, but they connect us through masks that we all wear. And that community around the fire, where maybe we dropped some of the masks because that fire was safe, and is harder to find. So,
giving you snaps for that. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I love what you do. I love what we do. I love, this space and approaching it with a reverence and really doing some serious work. That's what you're doing. Yeah. And it's not just a Fireside Project. What else keeps you busy nowadays?
So, I helped to support the launch of One Village Healing in 2019. Also, so this is a project that is BIPOC centered, BIPOC led, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, and it's a wellness space. So now it's a online wellness space. Because of the pandemic, we were forced to give up our physical space and move online. And that's actually been pretty transformative because we've been able just to connect with more people and just create this sort of virtual community. And, people are on the computer, on their screens now all the time. So to know that you can drop into a room every day and there's some sort of community there waiting for you, that is a healing space where you can relax, where you can meditate, where you can be in mindfulness, where you can be in conversation is, I think, super, super important to match these high-powered, productive spaces with a different type of production, with a different type of getting things done, which is being in rest and restfulness and well-being. And so it's a space that is, again, free. So we do fundraising for our practitioners, so they're paid, but so that cost doesn't have to go to the people who are coming for the healing, because healing is a birthright, and people just need more and more access to it. And so that is something that keeps me busy, and I'm just so blessed to work with such a powerful community of practitioners who teach 1 or 2 classes a week. So there's usually something almost every day that someone can go to. Some of our things are affinity based and BIPOC centered, and then some of our sessions are open to all people. So that's a piece of what's keeping me going. I've also been a part of this amazing group of folks that do a community leadership program, and it's called the Community Leadership Program out of New Haven, Connecticut. We actually just tried a first round of virtual cohort because of the pandemic. So, but it's a leadership program that's really about values-based leadership and it's not a technical leadership program. Folks are learning about how to show up fully in the moment, how to be noticing patterns, and how to listen.
Well, you just touched on it. It's like, when I talk about Leadershipedelics on the podcast, the adelics is about manifesting, like psychedelics manifesting the psyche, and this is about manifesting leadership. But this isn't leadership in the CEO title type of leadership, which a lot of people get confused. This is leadership on how do you manifest a better future for yourself, your community, how you're in the moment, how you take some of those teachings and have a better life and create a better world. And those are really the conversations I want to have more of, which we did today, which is fantastic. This is like, it's exactly on point. And so with the work you've done with New Haven, with that community you have there around the community leadership, now you're in Oregon, who's pretty advanced in how they're trying to work with psychedelics. Are you going to look at adding more projects to the table here and things you could help with?
Sebastian, my personal board says no.
I figured mine would too if I had so many things. I'm blown away here. I was like, she must be singing her mantras every night, because I'm just doing a podcast and 2 other projects, and that's enough.
Well, you have kids, so I don't have children, so that's work. I think it is inevitable, that I will, be an active community member. Yeah. I don't necessarily intend to start anything else right now.
That's wise.
But I feel like being able to pull some Oregon practitioners into One Village Healing would be awesome. I'm really excited about connecting with the ceremony community here, as well as really through Fireside, that hat, really helping to raise awareness about the peer support line and our educational training programs and what we're up to, and plugging in through the gaze and angle of Fireside Project into really ensuring that what's happening in Oregon is successful, because we want it to be replicated around the country. So really helping to really anchor and root risk reduction, harm reduction, and peer support as tools that are necessary and needed within the psychedelic space, and into the ecosystem here in Oregon as well.
Beautiful, full of wisdom. I like that. It's like, this is something I have to remind myself a lot. It's like, there's all those things you could help with, but there's only one of you, and
there's only one. And I want to be around for a while, so
there you go. So you gotta
pace myself.
You gotta pace yourself. I was gonna say that. As you were talking, it's funny. I had this picture of live fireside sessions in Oregon that would be more integration circles where people could actually gather. in the summer and meet together to actually have that live experience after maybe a pandemic and rekindling that sense of community. I think it would be beautiful without necessarily involving psychedelics, but like taking Fireside from the digital to the
yes. Are you peering into my brain? Yes, that's definitely something we're excited about.
I'm listening.
We definitely want to help make that translation possible in some ways. And so moving toward some live in-person integration and reflective listening type events is something that we are very, very keen on. So I would love to see at least a couple of events a year this year live and in person. So, and potentially how we organize them might end up being regional. So yes, in Oregon, but also we have 85 volunteers like all over the country. So being able to pull folks together to have some live integration time and community time is definitely part of our future for sure.
Beautiful. I'd love to see that and help make that happen. So I think it's very needed. So thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah.
You mentioned
Were you going to pull a card for yourself?
Oh, a card. Yeah, I will pull a card for myself.
Let's pull a card for yourself.
Let's pull a card for myself, and maybe I'll let you close it with a song.
Sure.
If it's not too much to ask.
No.
Okay, I'll mix them a little bit. I'm gonna now, for people listening, I am now dropping the deck. Okay, there's one that really sticks out here. Oh, this is the one that my dog chewed up. It doesn't happen often, but you did have the clouds and I have the wind. And so this
perfect.
one,
Look at that. Activation.
This is the wind. So, activation, wind. I think it says it all. Like what it means is, I'm following the wind right now. I mean, I feel like I'm being blown by the wind and accepting that journey and helping activate others and spread the message. People ask me, where are you going? I don't know. I'm walking the path. So, the wind. And it's lovely. I'll put that on the screen, the two cards together.
Right?
And it's like the clouds and the wind, and then right before the meeting, I was the wind. That's the other thing is all the instruments are breath instruments. And so breath for me is a huge part of all the work that I do. And so flute, harmonica, mouth harp are really powerful ceremonial instruments because you're basically using your entire body and energy to heal yourself and others in the process. I mean, singing as well is all about using your breath, the wind is a big deal. Yes, talking about singing and the wind. So
let's use a little wind for this closing song. I'll do the crown chakra, song for the crown chakra, which is Sweet Revolution. And so this song, was the song that I sang that came through when I stepped into this clearing when I was taking a walk out of the woods and the sun hit me and the song came out. And it has some kind of double meanings, some double entendres in revolution. So the words are, then I'll sing it and you can join me if it feels good to you. So the words are, in this revolution, in one revolution around the sun, and then it repeats, in one revolution around the sun. In this revolution around the sun, breathe in, breathe out, speak truth. And so it's the song for the crown. And so when we sing the songs, we go all the way up the chakra system and we end at the crown. And so this is sort of this culminating message. And so in one revolution. Like we are literally, in this revolution, like going around the sun, and in our own lives and our own process. And we're also in one revolution together, as humanity, as earthlings, doing this. So we have our individual one, and then we have the total one. And then in this revolution that you've come here embodied as a human, to be anchoring love and moving humanity toward more liberation and equity, to this revolution of being awesome, this revolution of connection. In this revolution, we have to breathe in and breathe out and speak truth. Just keep doing that over and over and over. So speaking truth to yourself first, and then to others. And if we could just do that as individuals and as communities, as families, as nations, wow, what a world we will create. So I'll share the song. Just going to center myself a little bit here. In one revolution around the sun, in one revolution around the sun, in this revolution around the sun, breathe in, breathe out, speak truth, breathe in, breathe out, speak truth. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Thank you.
Sebastian, thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful. Really.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, follow me on Instagram at Leadershipedelics, or stop by my website and say hi at fooyad.com. That's F-O-O-Y-A-D. There's a lot going on. I've got a retreat coming up in October. I've got Flute Fridays, and I'd love to hear from you all, the listeners that tune in every week. And if you have suggestions for future guests, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm there, and I'd love to get more guests on the show. Thank you. Have a great day.